Talking all things SEC football with our good friend. He joins the airwaves once again, Chris Marler of the Fourth and Wrong podcast. He's also working directly with ESPN 104.5, the fine folks down in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Chris, what's going on, man? Appreciate you taking the time. And again, congratulations to you and your success. I've seen you all over the place the last couple of days.
Yeah, I don't know. Most notably that nut job on fentanyl who made that video out of nowhere, which was nice. It's been good, man. It's been good. It's like 100 days till college football, so it's like we're getting closer and closer. And honestly, didn't feel like it was that close until I saw somebody say it was 100 days. Like I'm pumped. You know, we talk about this all the time. It's like next will be magazine season, then it'll be media days, and then we're in the home stretch, and then it's time for football. So.
And, Chris, it'll be EA Sports college football season, which yours truly, believe it or not, I have already pre-ordered the game. So I'm proud to see.
I get a console. I don't have a console still.
I've got a PS5. So I bought a PS5 December of 2022 for this exact. I was getting a new phone at a Verizon store, and they had the PS5 in display, and I was like, do y'all have any left? They said they had 2 left. So I was like, you know what? This game, cross the fingers, is coming out at some point. Went ahead, scooped it up. Yeah. Goodness, I did, because at that point they were really hard to find. I don't know if they are anymore, but went ahead and got the deluxe edition, which dropped this morning as the time that we're recording this. So I'm a little excited. I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to juggle making the video game content, and it's the same week as SEC Media Days, so that is going to be
that's tough.
The game officially releases to the masses on that Thursday, so at least it's like when everything's kind of over. But I got the deluxe edition, so you get 3 days early access. So it'll be like that Tuesday. So it's going to be a bit of a balancing act, but it's totally fine. It's going to be a fun week, no matter what.
They're going to have something set up. They have to have something set up in Dallas. Like, there's just no – I fully expect multiple people to show up with a PS5 in a suitcase. Like,
hey,
that will be
right
a
here,
thing.
right here.
Yeah.
Yeah. The only question I'll have is if the internet will support the streaming that I want to do. But to your point, Chris, it's crazy to think 100 days till college football. We have officially made it to that point. Yeah. We're going to do a 100-day countdown till SEC kickoff. The SEC a couple days later, obviously, because you have the quote-unquote week 0 games. And then that Thursday, we got, I think, Arkansas and Missouri will play. And then, of course, OU on Friday. And then we get into the weekend. But 100 days essentially away from kickoff. Most overrated and underrated teams. I ask you this question, Chris, because I saw yesterday the SEC championship odds were released by FanDuel. So these are as of 2 days ago. And I'm going to list these off to you. UGA plus 185, Texas plus 310, Ole Miss plus 650, Bama plus 950, LSU plus 1,000, Tennessee at 1,100, Mizzou 1,500, A&M 2,000, Oklahoma 4,000, Auburn 5,000, Kentucky 9,000, South Carolina 10,000, and Florida plus 11,000. When you talk about overrated, underrated teams, are there any in the SEC that you feel like are getting more love than you've expected or you think they deserve? And do you think there are some that aren't getting quite that love? Because it's interesting now, right? These teams that typically would have been talking about as 9-3 teams or 8-4 teams and just kind of having feel-good seasons, they're all of a sudden sort of playoff contenders. And I feel like there's a lot of those, though, where there's some volatility involved and it can go one way or the other for a bunch of those.
Yeah. One, it's so messed up that you personally made the line for South Carolina that low. And I know the Gamecock fans are going to be upset with you about that. So I'm going to give you 2. And when you make this clip, I'm going to ask one request of this. Keep this entire thing in here because I think, and I want you to keep this
it'll be a great camera angle too. So you got that.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Finally. Planet Fitness is finally paying off. So here's the deal. There's 2 teams that I think are going to be very good, double-digit win type teams. But I'm just going to say this, like, we need to exercise caution with them because while I think they're going to be good, they both return starting quarterbacks. They return like a lot of talent on offense. They both had elite teams last year that won, I believe, 11+ games. But Texas and Missouri, if you just backtrack for a second, right? Like before last season, we're talking about Eli Drinkwitz, who hadn't had a winning season since he's been in Como. I mean, losing bowl games to Army and stuff like that. Like not a great run there in Como. Doesn't mean he's not a good coach. Like, that's what the narrative was up until last season. And now let's think about the body of work here. You're talking about, his first several years versus the one that he had last year. Then I go to Texas. Dude, the narrative about Texas for a decade was there's nobody that does less with more. They will never be back. Texas sucks. Like, it's this constant, they can't beat Kansas. Like, Sark had a losing season in 2021. They went 5-7. He was on the hot seat. And now we're talking about Texas, like, oh, they're going to be here forever. And I think they're again, both the teams are going to be good. I think Texas is going to be good. But, like, I just say exercise caution with the fact that think about how we talked about those programs for a long time, And now all of a sudden in 1 year, that narrative is completely turned. And, I'm just one of the people that thinks, like, you got to prove. We saw it last year with LSU. A lot of people had LSU potentially knocking off Bama in the SEC West. I'm just one of those guys. It's like, you got to prove it to me first, right? Like you have to stack seasons, and that's not necessarily something we've seen either of those coaches or programs do.
Chris, when people say or ask the question, is Texas back? What does that mean to you? I know it's kind of a funny thing, but also I think it's a legitimate conversation. What does it mean for you for Texas to be back or to have that conversation about them being back?
I think it's tough because it's like Texas is, I think if you ask a Texan, they consider themselves like a blue blood program. But there's not a ton of hardware in that trophy case. And 2005 was awesome. This last year was awesome. And I think you have to come into this league with so much confidence because they went down and slayed Goliath last year, a year that no one else could, not in Georgia, right? Went into Tuscaloosa and beat them by 10 plus points. I think that you're talking about them being back. You're talking about being in contention and a top 10 program every year. And I mean that from start to finish. I mean, you are recruiting at a top 10 level. You are like playing at a top 10 level, like throughout the entire season. And after that, you're also developing at a top 10 level, and you're putting kids in the league and putting kids in the draft. That's not something that we've seen since well before Sark got to Austin. I think we're going to start seeing it. And you saw it this year, right? But I think that that's something where, like, if you be a top 10 program, like you consider yourself to be for a full 12 months. And that's not something we've seen them do.
Chris, you've become very close with the LSU fan base, obviously doing the work you have with ESPN 104.5 Baton Rouge. What's the mood like of the LSU fan base, and how much patience do you think they're going to have with Brian Kelly? Obviously, again, it's year 3. This is kind of the year where folks determine who are you, right? Fairly or unfairly, that's just where we are. So, like, what do you feel like the mood is of the fan base? I think expectations are high, but it's also it's a big year for the Bayou Bengals.
Yeah. There's still a level of frustration from last year, for one, right? Like, it is, you had 3 first-rounders on offense. You had the Heisman Trophy winner. You had 2 first-round receivers. You had 2 picks. You had 2 picks in the first 6 overall draft picks of the NFL draft a month ago. And you were a 9-3 regular season team. And I think that, they had the worst defense in program history, which they're 2 years removed from having the worst defense in program history. So I think there's a level of frustration there. It's like it's still kind of like, man, like, I don't know if they want to buy in completely yet, right? It's a very proud, very, very like enthusiastic fan base. I don't know if they want to buy in completely, but I have, man. Listen, I fully get all the weird overreaction from the Brian Kelly comment from a couple weeks ago. But no team has been more all in on making the changes necessary to compete for not just an SEC championship, for national championship. Like, you got 5 new coaches on the defensive side of the ball. And you went out and got Corey Raymond. You went out and got Bo Davis. You got 2 of the best defensive coaches in the country at their position. So I think that the vibes are high there. I think you get Bama at home, you get Oklahoma. They're had 7 games that I believe DraftKings came out with for early lines. They're favored in 6 of them. The only one they're not favored in is A&M. I think if you ask any LSU fan, they think that's crazy. So I think the vibes are high going into the season. A lot of comments. You lose some star power on offense, but you got a lot there on that roster to replace it.
Chris, speaking of Texas A&M, the more folks I talk to, the more I feel like I'm a crazy person because I'm not necessarily drinking the Kool-Aid, or at least hesitant to drink the Kool-Aid on Texas A&M in year 1 of Mike Elko. Not even from the standpoint, Chris, that they're going to be terrible. I just think that I don't know why we don't allow Texas A&M to overachieve expectations. Like, I don't know why or how we got to a place where we go into a season with expectations of A&M winning 9 games in year one of a new head coach. I mean, am I a crazy person for saying, hey, let's shoot for 7-5 and you do better than that in year one of a new head coach, it should be considered a good year. I know the expectations are what they are in College Station, but I don't know, man. This seems like rinse or lather, rinse, repeat yet again, even though there's a changing of the guard.
So the smartest thing I've heard from anyone all offseason is what you said here and last week on our show on Fourth and Wrong when you said, I don't know why we won't just let them overachieve, because it's so spot on. And it's the best way to put it. Like they just, for whatever reason, every year, like they have, I think it's only minus 300 to bet on them not to make the playoff, which feels insane to me. Like that feels like that's, now granted, that's the 8th best odds in the league, but that seems insane to me with everything they have. Like, I mean, they lost a ton to the portal. You have a brand new head coach. I think Elko's going to be good. The schedule's not super easy, but it is manageable. I think that A&M is going to be good. I think we're going to learn a lot about them on week 1. But yeah, I mean, I'm with you, man. Like, let them be Auburn for once. They're both Colts. Like they both are super culty and weird. Like, let them be Auburn for once. Let them lay in the weeds, be a snake in the grass, and just sneak up on teams when like you least expect it. And I just don't know. I don't know why that hasn't happened.
Chris, the fact it's taken us this long to get to Alabama in this conversation, I think is sort of a microcosm. The fact, at least I feel like Bama is almost flying a little bit under the radar, right? They're not the favorite in the SEC this year. It's Georgia, it's Texas, and more people want to talk about Ole Miss and Missouri, it seems, than the Alabama Crimson Tide. Do you think that bodes well for Kalen DeBoer going in his first year? That I'm not going to say Bama's going to sneak up on people, but there's sort of this Bama gets to play the underdog role for the first time in quite a while.
Yeah, and I love that. You got to do it last year a little bit, but not like now. I mean, you're an underdog at LSU. You're an underdog at home to Georgia. You're a 2-point favorite at against Tennessee. I love it. I love the fact that you do that. And here's the thing. I think that I get the whole thing with Saban. I think the things working against Bama are very real. And I am not somebody that is like, I told you last year you were an idiot because you said they were gonna lose 3 games, and I was like, man, I've been hearing this for 5 years. Like I've been hearing this like, the dynasty's done, like blah, blah, blah. And it's like, dude, they won 3 out of the last 4 SEC championships. But this year, I think there's some very real things working against them. And like, you lost 39 players in the portal. That was like 6th most in the country. And again, a lot of people lost players in the portal. A lot of people didn't have a top 3 recruiting class every year for the last, decade and a half. And you're losing elite talent. So it's like they lost 39 guys. Oh, that guy wasn't going to start. Like, sure, they weren't all going to start, but for the most part, they're all like elite recruits at the very least. So that's concerning. Obviously, you save it. And then you talk about that schedule, man. This is the 3rd year in a row that Bama is playing a very difficult schedule. And people love to shit on Bama, but they don't play a difficult schedule. This is the 3rd year in a row they're playing a difficult schedule. Before that, I believe they finished with the top 7 ranked strength of schedule in the country 5 out of 7 years prior to that. So it has not gotten any easier. And you talk about you get Mizzou at home, at Tennessee, Georgia at home, Oklahoma on the road before you get Auburn at LSU. And that's not even mentioning Wisconsin. So all those things are working against them. But here's the thing that people forget more than anything. Kalen DeBoer coached in a national championship game 4 months ago. And I keep reminding people, like, the dismissal of him being a good coach is stupid if you're an SEC fan, because it's like, I heard like the Husky Harsin thing, like he's from a state that's somewhat close to where Brian Harsin came from. Like, so they're the same person. He's already recruited well. He kept Brian Williams on. The staff as a whole has done well. But he coached a national championship game 4 calendar months ago. And everybody who thought that Dan Lanning should have been your top choice, if he was and you didn't get him, you got the guy that beat him 3 times in the last 2 years. So I think that he is going to do really, really well.
Chris, the Florida Gators are a fascinating ball club to me this season because they may only win 4 or 5 games this year. They also could start 5-0 when you look at their schedule. Let's just have some fun. What happens? Again, this is the first 5 games. Miami at home, Samford, Texas A&M, at Mississippi State, a bye week, and then UCF. I mean, let's get crazy, Chris. What happens if Florida's sitting there at 5-0? How different is the conversation around them at 5-0 going into Rocky Top?
I mean, dude, I tell you what, it would be awesome. I think I'm like slowly becoming a closet Florida fan strictly because I want Billy Napier to succeed. Because like for the last year, everyone in our business, all the fans have just been like, that guy's gonna lose his job. That schedule's too difficult. They suck. None of us have really taken the time to be like, oh, what do they have? What's that roster got? Oh, they got Cormine McLean today. They've obviously got some good players on defense. They felt good enough at running back where they told ETN that he was going to be second string. And oh, by the way, they brought in unranked quarterback in the country this year who's going to play in some capacity, and he's going to sit behind a guy who, for the most part, last year was top 5 quarterback in the SEC in terms of efficiency for the full season. I love the fact that everyone's counting them out, and maybe everyone's right, but I think they can start 4-1 there. If they start 5-0, right, and they go to Knoxville, that is a perfect recipe for you. Want to talk about you see it with Georgia and Bama all the time, like a mental mind F. We saw it with Carolina when they played Kentucky sometimes, Arkansas when they played Mizzou. Like there's just some games and head to heads where you get lit in the third or fourth quarter and it's like, here we go again. And I think you kind of tense up, if you know what I mean. And I think that could be one of those situations. Dude, listen, that game's in Knoxville, but people forget Tennessee has only beaten Florida away from home twice since 1972. So I'm glad that game's at home. I think Tennessee's going to be really good this year. But it would be awesome for that program to kind of prove everyone wrong.
To your point in that series, Chris, if you go back and look at the history, I mean, there was a span where it went over a decade. Tennessee did not beat Florida, I think, at all. So, right. I mean, it's certainly there are still a lot of demons there when they see that Gator logo and some of the nightmares they have. Chris, appreciate you being gracious with your time. One last thing, and we'll get you out of here. Last year, it felt like Mizzou came out of nowhere, right? Like you mentioned, like the conversation this time last year was, Eli Drinkwitz is on a hot seat. He may lose his job. They were picked to finish 6th in the SEC East. I mean, that's insane when you think about it. Is there a team, and if you say no, totally fine because it's a long shot, but is there a team this year in the SEC that you think could be last year's Mizzou or even be close to that?
I love that question. We did this a week or two ago on Fourth and Wrong in the Daily Podcast. I think it was with Mike, but man, great minds think alike on this one because I love the storyline, right? Like I love the storyline of what they were able to do last year, and a bunch of us found them out, right? Like it just every year we fall for the same stuff. That's why I always say it's like we treat Mizzou like they're Vandy with fake ID. It's just like they will never be good enough, and I don't understand why. But I will tell you this: if there's a team that can be this year's Mizzou, it's the team that you and I both said we should just lay low and fly under the radar. A&M. I mean, listen, Vegas, they didn't build all those buildings out in the middle of the desert over nothing. Like, there's a reason why they've got to be somewhat high on them. And I tell you what, Mike Elko has been a great coach. He turned around Duke. He got into 9 wins in year 1. I think they got 9 wins 2 years in a row. Obviously, still a lot of talent on that roster. They don't play Bama or Georgia. They don't play Georgia because they think he just will never make Georgia go to College Station. But I think that there's a lot of pieces in place there where starting with game 1, they could put everyone on notice and upset the biggest brand in college football historically and beat Notre Dame. I think it would be A&M.
I think my super long shot, Chris, there's not a lot of reason for this. It felt like there wasn't a lot of reason if I'd have told you Mizzou was going to win 10 or 11 games last year. So I'll have some fun. I'll go Arkansas with Taylon Green and Bobby Petrino. Just maybe. I mean, their schedule's pretty tough.
Dude,
but
hold on. If they got 8 wins, that's I feel like that's huge. That's a success.
That would be with the schedule they have and some of the holes they have on that roster. I think them or maybe even Kentucky, who's flying super under the radar. And from the Kentucky folks I talked to, they said that's actually intentional because they've they've hyped up their quarterbacks the past couple of years, and those guys have underachieved.
Yeah.
So they're like, if you see less of the promo and the hype around Brock Vandagriff, it's actually on purpose. So maybe Kentucky comes out of nowhere. Either way, Chris Marler, Fourth and Wrong. Check out the Fourth and Wrong podcast, ESPN 104.5 Baton Rouge. He's doing fantastic work. And Chris, just in case folks don't know where to find you, let them know where to check out all your work.
Yeah. So my newest Twitter account that hopefully will not get banned again, Vern Funquist CFB. I got to run and go do this radio show. But I appreciate it. It's always great chopping up with you. I'll get at you soon.
Chris, you're the man. We'll talk soon.
See you, bud.